All right, so today we are going to be diving into some really, really useful stuff for like everyone out there. Interview prep.
Mm-hmm.
We're doing a deep dive into this podcast episode we found, and it's supposed to be like full of advice that you can actually use,
Yeah,
Not just the generic stuff, but like those real aha moments
right.
to help you stand out from everyone else.
Yeah, what I thought was really interesting about this episode was how they really get into like the why of preparation.
Okay.
Like it's not just about memorizing a bunch of facts and spitting them out. It's about building confidence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they made a really good point about how when you've prepped well, you're not like reciting answers from memory, you're actually having a conversation.
Right.
And that just changes the whole like dynamic, don't you think?
Totally.
Yeah.
It shows that you're genuinely interested and you've really thought about the opportunity. It's kind of like, I mean, think about it this way. You wouldn't show up to like a client pitch with just a vague idea of what they need, right?
Yeah.
Like you'd come in with a well-researched plan.
Totally.
You'd be ready to answer questions and show off what you know.
Yeah.
It's the same with an interview. It's like you're selling your skills,
Yeah.
your experience,
Yeah.
your potential.
So true. Okay, so we get the whole confidence boost from prepping, but this episode actually gives like 6 concrete steps to really nail it.
Yeah.
So I'm curious how they break it down. What's like the first thing they suggest?
Well, they start with something that might seem obvious, but it's super important, and that's researching the company. And I don't mean just like glancing at their About Us page on their website.
Right.
You got to go deeper.
Oh, they gave a really interesting example. Like, imagine you're interviewing at, let's say, a fashion retailer. So don't just know what brands they sell, right?
Yeah.
Dig deeper. Have they like expanded into any new markets recently? Have they launched any sustainability initiatives? I mean, those details tell a story about where they're headed.
And understanding that story is key because it shows you're not just there for any job. You're interested in their world, their challenges. It's all about connecting the dots between what you've done and what they need.
That makes so much sense, yeah. It's about showing them you've done your homework and you're invested in being part of their success, not just your own.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And while we're on the topic of research, the podcast also highlights this other goldmine of information.
Sure.
Employee reviews. You know those websites like Glassdoor?
Yes.
They can actually give you a glimpse into the company culture, what it's really like to work there.
That's so important. And it's something I think a lot of people just don't even think about.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you could have all the skills in the world, right? But if you don't fit in with the company culture, it's not going to be a good experience for anyone.
Exactly. It's got to be the right fit for both sides.
Okay, so we've researched the company. We've got a feel for their culture. What's next on this interview prep checklist?
So this is where things get really interesting. Step 2, according to this podcast, is all about decoding the job description.
Decoding. I like that. Tell me more.
So they suggest like actually printing it out, the job description,
Okay.
and really like dissecting it, highlighting keywords, identifying those skills and experiences they're looking for. It's almost like you're piecing together a puzzle.
Oh, I love that visual, piecing together a puzzle. Like you're trying to unlock the code to what they're really looking for in a candidate.
Exactly. And once you've got all those pieces, you can start connecting them to your own experiences.
Right. So it's like telling your story, but in a way that actually like resonates with their needs. It's like, oh, you need someone who can manage these really complex projects. Well, here's how I successfully led a team through this like really similar challenge.
Yes. And they actually recommend having those specific examples ready to go for each skill or experience they list in the description. That way you're not, caught off guard in the interview. You've got those concrete examples to back it up.
That's such a good point. I think we've all been there where you're like on the hot seat and your mind just goes blank.
Oh, totally. Happens to the best of us. But that's what preparation is for. And speaking of preparation, this podcast really ties these next 2 steps together. So it's preparing your answers, right? But also preparing your questions.
Okay, because an interview shouldn't just be like a one-sided interrogation, right? It's a two-way street.
Exactly. And asking good questions. It's not just about being polite. It's about getting information for yourself, right? Making sure that this is actually the right opportunity for you.
It shows you're curious, you're engaged, you're thinking critically about the role. Plus, you get those valuable insights into the company culture what it's really like to work there.
Yeah, they even suggest having a mix of questions ready to go.
Yeah.
So, some about the role itself, some about the company's goals, maybe even a question or two about the interviewer's experience.
I've never even thought about asking about the interviewer's experience. That's such a good idea. It's a good way to connect with them, show you're interested in their perspective too.
For sure. It can be a really powerful way to connect on a more personal level.
Yeah.
But let's circle back to those answers for a sec. The podcast, they really emphasize that crafting your responses isn't about writing a script and just memorizing it word for word.
Right. It's about finding that balance of being prepared but also sounding natural and like you're not just reading off a teleprompter.
Yeah, yeah.
So what do they say about actually practicing?
So they actually shared a few different ways people do it. Some people find it helpful to record themselves answering common interview questions. Others prefer to do those mock interviews with a friend or family member.
Oh, yeah. I've heard those mock interviews can be super helpful because it's simulating that pressure of the real deal, right?
Yeah, exactly. Gets you used to thinking on your feet, responding to questions in real time. Plus, it's a chance to get feedback on your body language, your tone, all those nonverbal cues that can make a big difference.
It's like that saying, practice makes progress, right?
Yeah.
Even if you don't feel 100% confident, the more you practice, the more comfortable you'll get.
100%. But even with the best preparation, sometimes curveballs happen. And that's where step 5 comes in, preparing for the unexpected.
Preparing for the unexpected. That sounds like a whole deep dive on its own, honestly.
Right.
How do you even begin to prepare for, I don't know, the unknown?
It's a good question, and this podcast had a really interesting take on it. They basically said it's less about, trying to anticipate every single question they could possibly ask you.
Okay.
And more about building your confidence, your resilience, that ability to just kind of roll with it.
So it's more about having the mental agility to just handle whatever comes your way.
Exactly. And they even shared this story about a candidate who got hit with a totally left field question, something completely unrelated to the job or their experience.
Oh no, what did they do?
So instead of panicking, this candidate took a breath, acknowledged that, yeah, this was unexpected, and then just used their problem-solving skills to talk through how they would approach it.
That's awesome, because even if you don't have the perfect answer, just showing that you can think on your feet and not completely freeze up under pressure, that's got to be impressive.
Totally. It's all about showing you're adaptable, resourceful, and you don't just crumble when things get tough.
Right.
Which brings us to the final step in the podcast little interview prep framework here. The follow-up.
The follow-up. It seems so simple, but it can make or break you.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
And they don't just mean dashing off a generic thank you email. They really emphasized making it personal, making it memorable.
Okay, so how do you make your follow-up stand out?
Well, the podcast suggested reiterating your interest in the role, mentioning something specific that you discussed in the interview, and maybe even tying it back to something you learned in your research.
Oh, nice. So it's that last chance to really solidify a good impression. It shows you were listening, you were engaged.
Exactly. It's that little extra effort that can make all the difference.
So we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. It seems like the main takeaway here is that interview prep, it's not just a chore to check off your list.
Right.
It's an investment.
Totally. It's about showing up with confidence, knowing you've done your homework, and remembering that it's a two-way street. You're interviewing them just as much as they're interviewing you.
It's all about finding the right fit. And hey, who knows? Maybe your next interview will be the one that lands you your dream job.
Fingers crossed.
So as you get ready for those upcoming interviews, think about these 6 steps we talked about.
Yeah, which ones really resonate with you?
Which ones can you really focus on to shine?
And remember, preparation builds confidence.
Go out there and crush it.